Yeah.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Hi, guys, and welcome to the 6th episode of the Long Lost Explorer podcast. I'm your host, Sfisken, and today we have Brent Evans, who is currently living over in the Taipei area, and he is a teacher who has been living there for a little over 4 years now. Brent has been very involved and very he's been looking into a lot of the issues, and I wanted to talk about kind of his transition from America over to the Hong Kong and Macau area. So please give it up for Brent Evans. Hi, Brent.
Whoop, whoop. Give it up.
How you doing, man?
Pretty good. I do have to correct you a little bit, though. You're using the word very too much, and
Okay.
I'm not very involved. I'll give my very best.
I feel like you are a lot more involved than a lot of other people over there, though. From everything that I see you post, the things that I hear you talk about and stuff, I feel like you pay attention more than others.
That's probably true, although I will say the gap in my last 3 or so weeks of information is a bit unfortunate. But
should I just start this
I do
over
my
and say you're
best.
an idiot?
Yeah, that'd be a lot better.
Yeah,
I can just say Durka. But I guess when I talk to people, I do tend to hold my own in at least a conversation, though I can't control what they're thinking. They might be thinking I'm an idiot the whole time. So we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. So when you graduate, when you graduated college and you flew over there, I know you took one trip for it was like a week or two before then. What was it like actually transitioning over? I guess you could talk about, your first 2 weeks and then when you actually moved over there and stuff, but how was that transition?
For me, it was definitely like a shock. I wrote when I came over. So I came over as an intern in 2015, and it was like a 3-month program. And we just were supposed to come over and work in the classroom to get teaching experience in a new place and then do the tourist thing.
Mm-hmm.
But and then when we came, we're supposed to keep a journal the whole time. So while I was here, I was keeping a journal and writing all the stuff. And I remember vaguely what some of that was about. But it would have been, I should have read that before we did this to kind of remind myself of how out of my world I was, because I was a very, I think, typical American in a bubble from a small town,
Yeah.
And never went anywhere, never did anything. And then suddenly I'm thrusted into Macau, China, which is, for people that don't know, actually, when I came here, I didn't know, I'd never even heard of Macau. So it's the special administrative region of Macau, or of China, which is basically China, but it's, the one party, two systems thing, or one system, two party, whatever that is.
Did the British previously have control over that? Was that the territory of the British? The Portuguese. Gotcha.
Yeah. So for the last 400 years, it was the Portuguese, and then in 99, I think, they handed it over to the Chinese under the one something, two systems. What was it? Shoot, I'm having trouble remember. The one country, two systems. Yeah, that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so they're supposed to maintain their autonomous status, have their own currency, own laws, governance, and that stuff. And then that's supposed to last for about 50 years, I believe. So in 2049 or something like that, they are supposed to return to China. And so there's kind of the skepticism of what's going to happen at that point. Although I think we're seeing now what's going to happen long before that point, since Hong Kong's kind of a model of what's going on.
Yeah.
So, I don't remember your original question, but
just like the transition, like just what was it like?
Oh yeah, So I wrote the journal, and I remember I was very shocked because I had never been anywhere, and I showed up here thinking I'm going to a third world country where everything's underdeveloped, and I show up and it was, Macau is the Vegas of Asia. I think one of their casinos does 11 times the revenue of all of Vegas combined.
Yes, yeah.
And so it's just, it's a huge hot zone for.
And the hotels are huge. If you look at the MGM Grand over in Vegas compared to, the Wynn or, whatever that's over there. They're
Mhm.
ridiculously huge.
Yeah, it's insane.
So you
Actually,
get everybody from the east side because there's not really many gambling areas on the east side of the world that
mhm.
has. There might be like some or a little bit of gambling, but not nearly to the extent of what Macau is.
Yeah, Macau's definitely the hub. And so if in the US you have, what is it, 350 million or 300 million or
Mhm.
something people, you have billions of people over here.
Yeah.
And so, Macau is the hot spot that they all come to.
Hmm.
It's just ridiculous. Obviously now it's down for sure, but the
Now, for people
the
who don't
general vibe.
know, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but there is a north and east side, and the northern side is kind of more of the older Macau area where it has just some of the older casinos, and the southern part, when you cross the bridge and go down south of the island in the Taipa area, there are the more newly developed. It looks a lot more like Vegas versus the north end, like
Mm,
past the bridge on the north.
yeah. There's a huge, like, you could walk for maybe 20 minutes and see an insane income uh, inequality going on. It's like you've got these houses that are completely kind of broken down, and there's some that are made out of train cars and stuff, and you see stuff hanging. Obviously, there's really not any electricity or anything. It's just a place for them to get cover. And then you walk for 10 minutes, and you're one of the greatest casinos in the world.
Yeah, and
So,
so that I actually have a video of it showing basically the income disparity, because I'm not sure if that was like a train system. You said it like shut down and became like a little bike thing. You know what I'm talking about? Basically over that across that freeway. So you look on, the Portuguese kind of village area. It's all broke down, and then you look on the other side of the street, and it's all beautiful like Vegas style hotels, just on steroids.
remind me, what do you mean the train thing?
There's something,
I
there's
don't
just
recall.
kind of something where you take the stairs and you go up, and it looked like there was like a train that was like circling around the area, but apparently it was like not developed at the time I went, so
Oh, the
people were riding.
Sky Rail.
Yes, and
Okay.
apparently at the time people were riding their bikes around
Mhm.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a really foggy understanding of that actually, because I've heard so many things over the years. But
Hmm.
initially, initially I was told that it was just in construction, and then after that, Mona, she was going to the university here, and she told me that they talked about it in her class, and apparently she said that they had did the budget completely wrong, and everything was way over cost.
Mm.
And then so they just stopped, and it was years of being vacant. And then after that, I was told that they bought the wrong size cars to fit on the sky rail. So they have all these super expensive car rails that are
Hmm.
just in storage that they can't use. And then after that, I talked to some construction guys that were high up in kind of the construction in a lot of the casinos around here that I had met, and they were telling me that it was, I don't remember specifically what it was, but they told me that the car size was not actually the issue, and there was something else. And actually, now over the last couple months, after 5 years of being vacant, they've started running them. So they just
Oh,
got up
okay.
and running. I think a few months ago now, maybe 6 months ago now, they're actually running.
Hmm.
But yeah, as far as the difference in the size between Macau and Taipa, it's completely different. If you go over from the Macau side, it's much older. That was the land that was already there, from my best understanding.
Hmm.
And most of Taipa and the Cotai Strip with all the casinos and stuff, this is all brought in land. So, like Dubai brings in all that land and creates their own islands. It's similar to that, to where they're just
Yes.
constantly doing construction, bringing in all their own land, and then they're building on top of that.
So yeah, when I remember flying in, and there was literally just areas of sand just everywhere, and they're basically making islands. They are expanding so much
Yeah.
because there is such a high demand for gambling, for these eastern countries. You're probably getting Russians, Middle Easterns, Turkish, everything. And even, I don't know, if does mainland China allow gambling in Shanghai or something like that?
That's something. That's something I don't know a ton about, unfortunately. I'm sure that they would. I don't understand why they wouldn't.
Hmm.
Pretty much anything that brings uh, currency to the Chinese government, which is most of their big businesses and stuff, is owned by the government. So I can't
Yeah.
imagine why they would not do it. But
Yeah.
technically, I don't know. I just know that Macau is the hub
Yeah,
for gambling.
I guarantee China really wants to get their hands on Macau and Taipa,
Mhm.
just because of all
Well,
the income that's being generated through there.
well, I think even with that, the restrictive laws that's going on with supposed to be the one country, two systems, I think from my understanding is that Macau is pretty much completely under the control of China. And that's why you don't really see the same sort of riots and stuff that you see in Hong Kong because Macau is much more subservient, I guess. Like they're more pro China than Macau, maybe because the population is so much smaller. I'm not entirely
Interesting.
sure why,
Hmm.
but I know a lot of Chinese people here, and they don't have the same views towards China that people in Hong Kong do, and that could be because the school I work at is very pro China.
Hmm.
For the area, so more of the people that I know happen to be pro China. So it
Yeah,
could just be my own observation. I'm not sure,
gotcha. So
but
they're focusing more on the resistance, which would be Hong Kong.
yeah, and I think that might be one of the well from my understanding, there hasn't been anybody coming in and demanding things in Macau, but on the other hand, Hong Kong was supposed to have democratic elections to where Macau, they're technically labeled as that, but the was it the chief executive or whatever that's in charge in Macau
Hmm.
is actually just selected by Beijing and then
Interesting.
runs unopposed. So you can call that democratic, I guess, but it's like, is someone allowed to run against them? I don't know. I just know that they're running unopposed and they're selected by Beijing. So in Hong Kong, you have true elections going on. So maybe it's more democratic. So the Chinese government wants more influence. And that's why it leads to, the oversweeping laws that they're implementing now. I'm not entirely sure, but that's kind
Hmm.
of, from my perspective, what it looks like.
Now, I heard in the recent elections over in Hong Kong, they basically the pro Hong Kong side just kind of wiped out a lot of these people in their Congress or their cabinets. I don't know necessarily the government structure that well, but I have heard that their most recent elections, they voted out a lot of people in their districts that were pro China.
Voted out that were pro China.
Yes.
Um, for me, it's very hard to say, and so I'll just be honest. Like this is a bit of a hole in my knowledge.
Hmm.
Uh, from what I can see and stuff that I've read, and I subscribe to a lot of kind of Chinese articles, I guess you would say,
Hmm.
to kind of see what's being talked about and whatnot, and then the Hong Kong and the U.S. And there's a huge gap in what they're all talking about. And so for me to know what is truthful, it's very difficult,
Hmm.
and I can't say what is true or what's not. But it seems to me like the Chinese government is coming in and trying to force influence to overtake and push their laws so that anyone that's saying anything bad about the Chinese government, they now with this new law that they push through, we're able to come and take those people. They're banning some books and whatnot from what I understand, or at least what I've read.
Hmm.
Um,
What kind of books?
Anything that is pro democracy.
Mm.
So if anything that's pro democracy is obviously going to conflict with the Communist Party agenda. And
Hmm.
so whether that's good or bad is not for me to say, but they don't want the democratic influence
Yeah.
there. As people, if they get rid of it now, maybe in 10 years, the knowledge of it is just super minute. Same in North Korea, you just don't let the information in and people don't know anything.
Hmm.
So it makes it much easier to control the population. So whether that's what's going on or not, I don't know, but that's just what I'm kind of gathering.
Now, when it comes to the censorship You hear a lot of things over the US and people talking about that China is this huge repressive government that's just basically just stepping down on Hong Kong and even Taiwan and everything like that. And they are basically trying to add more censorship to it. How true is it? And do you believe that the US is making kind of over exaggerating it? Or do you believe it's 100% true or it's even worse?
So I do want to, kind of add in that I do work at a Chinese school,
Mhm.
and so there, I'll tell you what I know, but at the same time, I'm not going to be super detailed.
Political. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just kind of giving, the surface level information, and I'm not an expert by any means. It's just what
Yeah.
I see
Mhm. And
and
of course,
whatnot. So
not everything I say, I don't want to get you in trouble. So I believe this is kind of a major difference that people don't realize that in our country, if Donald Trump's elected, we could basically almost say anything besides that we're going to kill him. I mean,
yeah,
we could say anything. A lot of
yeah,
people in
it's a
America don't
huge difference.
realize that if I just talked to another person who wants to have an interview with me next week over in Belarus, and it's actually illegal to speak out against your government. And
Mm,
the and I want Americans to know that even though there might be issues in our country, you can say whatever you want. You could say and do pretty much whatever you want when it comes to social media. And what makes me sad is talking to you and other people in different countries. They can't. And so my goal is to try and get as much information as I can to, expose these countries, good and bad. But a lot of people who are talking to me, can lose their jobs or they could get kicked out of the country. And of course, I don't
mhm.
want to put you at any risk like that. So
Well, my main goal here is to get you kicked off of YouTube. So I'm,
I know I've been just trying to get myself canceled in the US as fast as I can.
yeah, I'm sure
I
it'll
might as well
happen
just drop
soon.
the N word and then just get it over and done with.
When you say that, you must mean,
No,
you know what?
no.
Let's move on. Let's move on. uh,
So anyways, when it comes to the censorship, tell me what you can.
it's a bit. I mean, it's interesting because obviously when I came here, my my belief was, communism is absolutely horrible, oppressive. The people must hate it. Everything's horrible. They're oppressing their people. People are starving. People are dying. And there's a lot of evidence throughout history to support that. I don't think we need to go into it. I think anyone with any basic history knowledge knows what communism and socialism can lead to.
Hmm.
And, even other places in the world that have it going on right now, deaths are happening every day because of it. But it, when you talk to some of the people, it does change your outlook a little bit. So I've had conversations with teachers that I work with, and I wouldn't say that their arguments are convincing, but you can understand from their point of view that when you are brought up in this system,
Hmm.
you don't look at it in the same way that, if you're brought up on the outside looking in, to where in the US, ever since I've ever heard the word communism, it was automatically tagged with worst possible thing. We got the Cold
Evil.
War,
Yeah.
stopping communism, all the deaths that communism, socialism have led to. And I'm not saying that I agree with it by any means. I'm very against socialism and communism. But it is interesting to talk to the people that are a part of it. Though I need to
A
add
part of it
beforehand,
as in like pro-communism or just living in
not
the system?
living in the system. And
Hmm.
obviously, I need to, you know, add in the fact that the people that I'm talking to are living in Macau. Macau is an extremely wealthy place.
Hmm.
These are not people that are in poverty in China, living in small villages that are suffering to survive. So take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt, obviously, because I'm sure that people's perspective in Macau is completely different than someone that's in northern China along the Mongolian border. You
Yeah.
know, so Their perspective of the people I've talked to is, obviously the U.S. has done a lot of things in the past that people would not approve of. Without going into it, there's different reasons for our soldiers and whatnot to go into different countries. People agree or disagree with what those reasons are. People over here, in the most case, think that the U.S. is kind of a bully. They push their way into stuff that get value back that benefits their country. But you see
American imperialism.
Yeah. So if the U.S. was really concerned about any atrocity going on in the world, there's a whole lot of countries that we would be invading to help that we're just not. And so they will point that out to me, and they'll talk about, yes, the Chinese government has its problems and this and that and the downside of communism, but then they'll also point to a lot of problems in democracy and how the U.S. is doing this or that. And they kind of justify it in a way that you can't tell them they're wrong because it's their opinion. And they don't necessarily, because the elections, like in the US, we're very political. We have elections and we follow the news cycle and we're all disputing and arguing about left and right all the time. That's not really a thing here. They don't have that dissent among the people because it is what it is and they can't do anything about it. So when I ask them, like, do you care about, that your voice doesn't matter? They don't really care. They've never had it matter, and it doesn't seem to be an issue to them, which is a very different perspective that I don't think a lot of people think about. And so that was something I encountered.
Do you feel like with that perspective, they're just more libertarian than actual communists?
I would say their mindset is libertarian, but the reality is they have no ability to be libertarian.
Okay.
It's like I'm living my life, I'm doing my thing. What the Chinese government is doing, it doesn't really affect me. They have, their day-to-day life doesn't change. They've been living under this system for a long time. And I could say, that might completely change if you go the further inland to China that you go. Because like I said, Macau is the special administrative region of China, which is supposed to be governing itself, its own money, own political system, but it's kind of under the sheet seeming to be controlled by China, but it doesn't seem to make much of a difference to the people here.
I see. So they're just not necessarily complacent, but do you feel like they're just kind of indoctrinated to, just continue with their lives?
I think it feels that way. And a part of me, I was thinking about this after I had a few talks with some of the people I work with. And at first, when they say that, it just sounds like a horrible thing. Like indoctrination must be absolutely horrible. But on the other hand, what you don't know doesn't hurt you is kind of a reality. And if they're living their life and they have a job, they're making money to survive, they're doing what they enjoy, nobody's oppressing them beyond what they know, they have no knowledge of any oppression that's going on to them, then it doesn't matter to them because they don't have any.
Make the Matrix argument of the red pill and blue pill. They're comfortable, they're fine, and everything. They take the blue pill, and they don't actually know the actual realities of how bad things are.
Yeah, that's kind of what it seems like, and you have people on different side of the argument, obviously, because on one side you'd say, yeah, I want to know about all the horrible things, and I want to be front line. I want to know everything. To where even if you know that stuff, what are you going to do about it other than, be stressed out and frustrated half the time? I didn't start getting into politics until the end of Obama, which was obviously when people start paying attention to the Trump-Clinton fiasco that's going on, and you start getting sucked in. And I've had far more stress and annoying times since that happened, to where before I just used to think, if the news says that it's true, who cares? President, they're all doing what's best for the people. And once I started getting into it and realizing the variations and the dishonesty that goes on in the entire political system, I didn't have these sort of issues going on. And a part of me wishes that I could just forget all of it and go back to the, no, I don't really like politics type of behavior. But the other side of me, I hate when I'm sitting at a table and people talk about something that I don't understand. And so I can't let go of it. Because of that, I want to be informed.
So
And
you're curious. You
yeah,
want to be informed, and you want to explore. I
yeah.
mean,
When
it's
people
human
tell
nature.
me
We want
stuff,
to explore the meaning of life and the meaning of our surroundings.
mhm,
I
it
mean,
feels
this is
very
why I'm doing
frustrating.
this.
Yeah, for sure. So I know maybe it sounds like I'm kind of defending like a communist agenda, which I'm not, but I try to look from their perspective of the different people that I've talked to here, and I do understand their perspective. And if it's not changing your life, why add the stress of fighting an opposition that you have no power to battle?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, do you think what I was just saying about kind of the news and everything, to kind of sum up and wrap up an answer though, do you think how Americans portray it is just misguided? Is it true and it's worse? Like, what do you think if you were to kind of rank it?
You know, it's so difficult to answer because it's like putting everybody in one basket, and it's just
Yeah,
impossible to
that is
do.
true. Yeah, no, I
So,
understand.
just this morning I was kind of reading some articles that varied from the Hong Kong, what's it called? Can't remember the name of the paper, but it's the Hong Kong Daily.
Hmm.
And then there was a Chinese article, and then I read one from the New York Times, and it was talking about Hong Kong. And the variation, and then I also read one from the Washington Post, and the variation was just so far. It's hard to get a realistic idea of who is reacting and how they're reacting, because each of those articles is written by one person, and they have an editor who has an agenda. Usually, the writers also have an agenda because they're under that specific,
Mindset,
news
kind of.
publication. Yeah, they're getting hired by that publication to set the agenda that they're wanting to set. I don't think that the news is very honest anymore, and it's very apparent if you actually go through, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, Washington Post,
Hmm.
Atlantic, all of these, they're saying different things, and
Yeah.
you can tell what kind of thing they're trying to promote. So
and
I
and
think
then
that,
that's kind of another reason why I'm doing this too. I want to know, people on the actual front lines, the people that are there to actually give me the perspective, and instead of some New York liberal who's writing for the Washington Post or whatever,
mhm,
doing some research on Twitter and Google to formulate an opinion that when I read it, that I basically comply with their opinion that's being read. So
mhm,
doing this podcast, it just kind of helps me get to know the true meaning of what is happening. And that's why I'm so interested in going to so many countries, because I just want to know. I mean, I went
mhm,
to Russia twice, and I thought it was the most dangerous place in the world. I realized one of the most beautiful places ever. The
mhm.
government, yeah, kind of bad. I mean, in my opinion. But is it dangerous and people are saying suka and fucking drinking vodka and stabbing each other? No, not really. And so everything on the media is just so exaggerated, and I know they're doing it just because they want to make more money, because people are driven off fear and anger and everything else. And it's just, I think this is what's setting the divide in the world. I think the news is basically helping propagating another civil world war or whatever it is. Basically, just they want to clash tensions with everybody, and it's bad.
Yeah,
Media, in my opinion, has gone way too far.
so I know this will never happen. Well, I guess I can't say never, but in my opinion, I don't understand how there hasn't been any action taken to hold media accountable. Because the first time that I discovered that the media uh, was allowed to be dishonest was, I think it was 2000, the end of 2015, maybe 2016. I can't really remember, but I was sitting there watching CNN because I thought that CNN had the, like, obviously the ignorant side of me is just like looking at the TV quality. When I looked at Fox News, I didn't really like the setup they had on the screen, and it looked like it was done with more cheaper quality. I go to CNN, and it's got that fancy breaking news. It made me think like, oh, that's brand new news I'm listening
You
to.
should start becoming a consultant for Fox News. Just be like, hey, this is a bad design.
So I'm always listening to CNN, and I hear Trump um, doing an interview, and he was talking about Japan and how we're paying for the defense of this and that and these different countries, and how we're spending out so much money to keep protecting them, but we don't really get a lot back. And I didn't know anything at the time, and I still don't know a ton about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw a moment of clear dishonesty, and from that moment, I started to question, what is the media telling me? And I started looking around and fact checking what they're saying, and I was astonished with the dishonesty.
Mm-hmm.
He had made a comment that if Japan doesn't want to do their part, then maybe we might consider pulling out and letting them control their own defense.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what he said. I think it's actually very similar quote to what he said. And then later that day, I got back from one of my classes, and I came in and I sat down and I'm watching CNN again. And they're giving highlights of the interview that he gave earlier that day. And they said, Trump says we need to pull out of Japan and let them defend themselves or something like that. Now, obviously there's similarities in those two things, but there's a clear dishonest skew that's going on that leads people to believe that we want to abandon Japan and the alliance that we have with them.
Mm-hmm.
And from that moment, like that little tidbit, I started fact checking. And when the news would say something, I'd go find the interview and I'd watch the whole thing. And I found that over half the time, they're leaving words out, they're leaving context out, they're purposely saying and twisting a couple words that they can say, no, we said this. Oh, we maybe got a little bit wrong, but that's basically what he said.
Yeah.
And it just started going and snowballing to where it's gotten so out of control now. It's just astonishing. You listen to an interview and you go hear what the news says, and it's just completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of what people listen to. So in going back to your question, it's just really hard to answer. From what I see, most of the mainstream media is left leaning. I don't think anybody's going to argue with that point. I think it's very obvious, which is to each his own. Whoever owns the outlet is going to control what way they lean, and that's their choice.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of how capitalism and the market works. It's their choice. Mm-hmm. But when most of these things are all one direction, and you have a population of people relying on this for honesty, it just seems wrong. And so going back to what I said before is, something that I think will never happen. I don't know how any legislation or anything has never been moved forward to make media accountable on both sides, right and left. You go to Fox News, you're going to have the same arguments that I'm making about CNN right now.
Mm-hmm.
So there should be there should just be accountability. They should not be able to completely mislead people based on an agenda. And anyway, this goes down a long rabbit hole that I could go on much deeper, but I'm sure that you don't want to get into it. So answering your question is difficult because China has so much money and so many different corporations in the United States, so many different things, that it seems apparent to me that if I had to pick one, I would say that the U.S. is downplaying what China is doing, at least in the corporations and the mainstream media.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how it looks to me. We have real atrocities going on in the world, and we're focused on things that have no statistical evidence in the United States instead. So I find it a bit confusing.
Yeah. And even when it comes to like some of the censorship, or kind of going off the censorship thing, monitoring. I remember talking to, I think it was a female over when we went to Hong Kong, and she was telling me that she uses certain apps because I think her phone has some like VPN thing, or it's like encrypted, so China can't be listening to what she was saying or like reading what she is saying and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
How true is that? Are there certain apps where Chinese or people in Macau, Taipa, Hong Kong and stuff just do not use because they do not want to be tracked by the government?
think if you're talking about locals, no, it's not true because they don't have the awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do, it's coming from US media, which is contradicted by the Chinese media. And so are they going to back their own country that they've lived in their entire life and they've been doing okay? Or are they going to believe a foreign government who's trying to penalize them and, causing them more problems?
Mm-hmm.
They're obviously going to side with their own country. So,
Are there
and
any
that's
apps
not
you don't use?
I mean, I wouldn't use a Huawei phone. I've just recently found out there's a bunch of apps that it doesn't really matter if they're Chinese or US apps. I don't know if you're familiar with just
Yeah.
the other day, Trump was talking about this executive order, I believe, to get rid of WeChat and
And
any,
Yeah.
TikTok, anyone that I read the thing today, what it actually said, and it's very vague. It leaves the door open for a lot, and I don't want to misquote it, but I'm kind of going for memory. But it's basically anything. It kind of opens the door for anything associated or under ownership or any company that has U.S. ownership or a stake in the U.S. And so
Mm-hmm.
that opens the door to a tremendous amount of companies that China has stake in, stuff that you wouldn't ever think that they have stake in. So, for example, there's a bunch of video game producers. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yes,
video
I
games
did
that
hear
much,
something about this. Yes.
but what is it? Riot Games.
Yes, it
So
was
sorry,
Riot.
I
Yeah.
pulled it up here on my computer. That's the maker of League of Legends, Epic Games, which is Fortnite, Activision, Blizzard.
Yeah, something
It's
about the
World of Warcraft.
microtransactions, the transactions within the game.
Yeah, they own a lot of stake in a lot of companies that people use, and they have these programs within these things. So, for example, there's I can't I don't remember what the game was, but it's a first person shooter that China had ownership in, or what was the main company called? It's Tencent,
Yes,
and
Tencent. Yeah.
and there was a download you were supposed to get, and it was to stop people from hacking the game. But the
Mm-hmm.
reality is, yeah, it did that, but it also had a backdoor that steals all your data. And so
Jeez.
everybody playing these first-person shooters, all their data is being stolen. And it is my guess, I'm sure, that in all of these things that they have ownership in and that they're providing stuff for, they're being contracted to program, do all kinds of things. There's backdoor stuff taking people's data. So I it's hard for me to say if this is really a bad thing. Some people say, who cares? I'm not doing anything wrong. Who cares if they have my information? Like,
Mm.
so it's to each his own, I guess. But they have stake in the NBA, NFL, Major League
Yes.
Baseball. So with this executive order, it does kind of leave the door open to ban all of these things that have Chinese stake in, or
Mm.
the what is it? What's the name? Tencent.
Yes.
So I don't know. That could be a huge thing if it goes to the extent that some people are thinking it might. But on the other hand, people that are super pro Trump, they're going to say, "Oh no, it's just about WeChat and TikTok because it's like direct Chinese connection." But technically, it does leave the door open for any stakeholders of the Chinese government in U.S. Interests. So
Yeah.
it's hard to say. Like I
But
said, again, it's hit and miss because you don't know what is true and what's not based on which media source you read.
do you believe that for America to resist China, do you believe they have to make some sacrifices like that for kind of the greater good of the American people and just the world in general?
Sorry to kill you with dead silence. I'm thinking
Oh, no, you're
without
perfectly fine.
without giving. I mean, I don't want to give nonsensical answers that I didn't think through, and it's hard to say. In my personal opinion, I think that sacrifices need to be made that is going to cause a generation to have some problems,
Mm-hmm.
to reinvest in the United States to help us get the deficit down. And but in order to actually do that, people have to be prepared for real change. And
Mm-hmm.
from what I see, I don't think that people are ready for that. I don't think people seem to be capable of handling difficulties in their life. They want what comes easy. It seems very obvious by what's going on in the U.S. with people rather to stay on unemployment than going back to work.
Mm-hmm.
So you either force it on the people against their will and have them rise up and do basically what they're doing already, or you keep going down this trail. China's going to continue to buy into U.S. corporations and businesses and banks. They're just going to get a deeper hold. And at some point, the reckoning will come and we will have to face it. But, who's to say if that's now or in 50 years or in 20 years? So for me personally, I would say we need to make some sacrifices, cut some stuff, maybe kind of in line with some of the stuff that Trump is saying now people will hate me and wish I'm dead for saying that. But,
Yeah.
I think that I don't think there's a lot of people that know economics and what's really been going on that would disagree that the U.S. has been taken advantage of with a lot of their trade around the world, and especially with China.
Mm-hmm.
And China's been breaking deals repeatedly over time. And so, they're going to do what they're allowed to get away with. This is the same thing a child's going to do. You tell them no and you let them do it, and there's no punishment, and they're just going to keep doing it.
Yeah, rewarding bad behavior.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't blame if I was, in the Chinese government. I'm going to get away with everything that I can get away with. The same thing that the U.S. gets away with everything it can get away with. It's just in a different direction. One is this way and one is that way. It's not that one's better over the other. It's, our perception growing up in the U.S. is probably that, oh, well, the U.S. does this stuff because they have the greater good in mind. But from another perspective, that greater good is nothing. That's not a greater good to them. So
Yeah, and there is actually a speaker I'm hoping to talk to in the future. His name's Michael Ballas, and he was basically talking about the U.S. and North Korean dispute, basically saying, "Hey, get rid of your nuclear weapons, stop testing, and we'll develop more peace." And the North Koreans are thinking to themselves, you've seen, or we have seen what you've done to other countries when you've done this. No, we are not going to do this. We are going to keep continuing what we're doing, and we're going to protect ourselves. And so, so it's kind of hard when you negotiate like that, because we do. I want to believe that the U.S. has the best interest of the world, and especially the American people. But you have to understand that a country in its own entity, it can't surrender necessarily like that. So the approach, I feel like, needs to change, because I do feel like it's good to be somewhat of a strong man if you have the best, not even intentions, but the best solution for the world. But I think it's kind of funny when people are shocked that they are not complying, or they aren't trying to change for the better, because they've seen what America does and they don't want to necessarily surrender.
mhm.
So
Yeah, I mean, that's the definite. Nobody wants to be. It's weird because you have a country that, is being controlled by their own, but you have another country that wants to come in and control them from the outside. And even if maybe the end game in 10 years that control leads to something great, the people that live during that time, they're being controlled from an outside entity that that they have no interest in. They don't see themselves as having a problem that needs correcting. So,
well, I think this is bridging us to the next subject, which is the riots in Hong Kong. And as basically what you just said, they are very scared about the control that they are getting from the Chinese government. And what have you seen? Let's start from the beginning. And, since you've been here basically since the conception of the riots and basically Hong Kong or China putting their foot down on Hong Kong, where did this all start? How did this all happen? And, just tell me everything that you know.
Mhm. Well, obviously, before I start, I'm absolutely not an expert in this area. So again, this is coming from an American who has been here for, 4 years, and I barely knew, a lot about the history going on. And just from what I've seen, China keeps kind of a bit invading what they're supposed to do. Similar to Macau in '99, they have that law that they're supposed to be autonomous for 50 years. Same thing with Hong Kong in '97. They had the same deal that was made. And from my understanding, the Chinese government's kind of been encroaching on it. And who's going to come in and tell China they can't do it?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody really. It's the U.S. And if the U.S. does it, they're the bad guy. Once again, encroaching on another country's, own business, I guess you can say.
Mm-hmm.
And so the riots start going on. I don't even know, when they started. It must have been last summer, I would think, or maybe a little before that or after.
It's been fairly recent, yeah.
Yeah, I remember, I didn't go over there a ton during the riots. I think a couple times, and I went over there. And the times that I went, I made sure not to be there after dark. I didn't want to be, involved in any of the violence or damage that was going on.
Yeah.
I also didn't want to be a part of, the riots, because you never know when it's going to switch and you have just hundreds of thousands of people in the streets. I don't know if you saw the photos of just the streets just completely swarmed with people rioting about their independence and Chinese rule coming in. But they wanted the Chinese government, from my understanding, to stick to what was promised. And from what was going on, that just wasn't the case. People were being I guess taken,
Mm-hmm.
if you want. I'm going to be a bit vague here.
Okay.
So, this is what I've heard. I don't know what is true and what's not. I can only go off what I've seen on here. So, people being taken for, speaking out against the Chinese government or opposing them, saying, Hong Kong independence, those leading activists getting in trouble or taken, books being banished that
Burned
or
or banished, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like one of those sci-fi books you read in middle school, and it's like, oh, that'd be a crazy world. Well, that kind of stuff is happening now, and it's happening in the U.S. too. That's what people will point out here. You point out any problems with the Chinese government, and they're going to tell you right back, well, look, the U.S. is trying to get rid of these books. They don't even want Harry Potter books in places, and that's a lot, less detrimental than a book about democracy. So
yeah, they didn't want the black character from Star Wars, the new Star Wars.
yeah, it's so you can do the tit for tat and talk about, maybe the Chinese government is doing horrible things, but I for everything that they're doing in Hong Kong, you can make an example in the U.S. something very similar that's going on. But for some reason, we look at it differently, and I do too. I don't know why, but in my mind, I'm thinking, well, what the U.S. is doing, it's not as bad. It's it's just one activist group that's trying to do it. To where this one is the main or the only party. So I get there is a difference in that sense, but the difference doesn't matter if it's accomplishing its goal, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if it's 2 people or 1 million people fighting for a cause. If the cause happens, it's been done.
Yeah.
So anyway, I went over there a few times. I tried to avoid the main protests. Went during hours when they weren't supposed to be going on. Basically, I would say it would be a kind of the vandalism and whatnot seemed like a very small proportion in what kind of happened recently in the U.S. When I went there, most of the businesses and stuff, people weren't destroying other people's businesses while claiming to love them. And they would basically throw trash in the street, block off roads, kind of start fires on the street. And there were some serious cases of violence that happened as
Was it
well.
at
But
the university? I think that was kind of one of the.
I don't
There was a lot of
recall.
controversial things. There was like a university or a school that was being kind of like held down by the protesters.
Yeah, there was a period of time where people were trapped inside, and there was some violence going on. But I don't recall being able to read and find out information of the specifics of what sort of violent things were going on. I'm seeing photos and partial videos, but those
Yeah.
only last for so long and they disappear. So I know people were trapped in a college for a while, but I don't know to what extent those people's lives were in danger,
Mm-hmm.
or if there's just it's hard to say.
Yeah.
So when I went there, the closest I got to it, there was riot police in the street, kind of blocking people, but nothing had escalated at that point. It was still probably pretty early in the day. It was 4 or 5, and they had the riot police out there with their shields and whatnot, blocking people. A lot of trash, barriers, bricks, stuff like that thrown in the street that some of the older generation were cleaning, sweeping out of the street. And some people, they bring them back, and just kind of like very small disputes, but not actual violence that I saw.
You were
But then
saying that it was illegal to wear black.
Yeah, they had a portion of time where it was, I believe, black and white both, because there are, I don't know if gangs is the right word, or organizations that were all black or all white
Yeah.
that were going around causing all kinds of, violence and problems, attacking people, doing all sorts of things, which I don't even necessarily think I could connect to the movement. It's kind of like in the U.S., you have people that are trying to peacefully protest, and on the other hand, you have people that are purposely trying to cause problems, thinking they need to rip down the entire system of the United States and restructure it, while they're standing next to people that are protesting and wanting peace and change.
Yeah.
So it's hard to draw the connection or know what is the disconnect. But yeah, there's a time where masks were outlawed in Hong Kong. You couldn't have any, and then this virus hit. All of a sudden, it's like you have to wear a mask, but they were just
Yeah.
outlawed. And so it's like kind of this confusing thing where they're still outlawed, but now they're telling you to wear a mask. But technically, if you wear a mask, you're in violation, and you were supposed to be arrested if you were seen wearing a mask. And the two overlapped for a while, and so it's a bit confusing. So then it changes, like, okay, well, medical mask versus a black mask, or covering your face.
Yeah,
So
kind of one
yeah.
of those like paintball masks or something like that.
Yeah, and there's different variations, and you can go online and see on YouTube. There's all kinds of videos of violence and whatnot that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
But personally, I didn't witness it, and I know how much I hate when I see stuff in the U.S. and I see people, putting their opinion on it before the facts come out. I hate that, because half the time it's the mob rule controls the narrative. And it's very rare that mob rule narrative is accurate. You wait for the facts to come out and you find out, oh, you know what, this was completely different. So it's not justifying at all that people are beating anyone is justified, but you never know what's going on. And so for me to say a lot on that, it's kind of difficult. Obviously, I'm being very vague in a lot of these topics, but I'm kind of doing it purposefully.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. Do you, two questions. One, do you think that there is less justifications for riots in the US versus Hong Kong? Or I'll have you answer that question first. Do you feel like Hong Kong is more justified in their protests and riots versus the US?
Yes.
Do you believe that what do you think the reaction would be? Let's just say if there was a similar George Floyd incident over in, say, Hong Kong, Macau, Taipa, or just anywhere in that general region. Do you feel like there would be the same reaction in that country versus the U.S.?
No, I think it'd be complete. I mean, to get that same situation here would be almost impossible anyway, because
Why is that?
you don't have the same. You have completely different environments. You have police officers that are trained to do something. When the, I'm, I absolutely support police 100%. I think their job is nearly impossible, and I would not want to do it at all. But there's also some problems with the system that that encourages them to make arrests, give tickets, do these sort of things because it's a business. Everything is turned into a business. The news, that's why we get the problems we have with the news. Everything's about getting income, reaching your quotas so that the next year you get more money. All of these things that incentivize people to make sure that they get arrests and whatnot. So I can't say a whole lot about here because I don't know if they have the same incentive structure going on. So it's hard for me to tell.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look about the shootings around the world from police and violence involving police, the U.S. has a significant higher amount of police shootings than other places, and that can be for any number of reasons. And people can say the cops are bad, but the fact is, if you tell someone, if you walk into room A, that guy has a 50-50 chance of having a gun that will kill you. You say you walk into room B, there's basically a 5% chance that guy has a gun to kill you. You're going to end up with more violence in the first room than the second room. This is very obvious, I think. And the U.S. has a lot of guns in society. And I absolutely support the Second Amendment. But the fact is, it does raise the intensity of the situation, the anxiety of the police officer who wants to go home to his family. So it's just a very different situation. And you're never going to run across a citizen here. Very, very rarely ever you're going to run across a citizen that has a gun at home or a gun in their car or a gun on them or any sort of weapon for that matter. It's just a different situation. So if it did happen, it would just be completely different, especially, the report comes out that the person is on all kinds of drugs and whatnot. I don't know how much would go public. I just don't think that situation would happen, but
do you believe that the government kind of suppresses some of the news kind of for the greater good, for not in their opinion, for the greater good, to not have a social disturbance and riots and things like that? Do you feel like in some ways that the culture over there or the government over there suppresses those kinds of stories so there's not that much divide?
I think that they do, and I guess that's kind of what I was getting at. It's not to say that it's good or bad. Obviously the situation of Georgia. Yeah, it's very different, and it's like those conversations, or maybe you didn't have it because you studied business in university, right?
Yeah.
So I was in history, and so some of the conversations we would have, like a little bit of the what's the greater good. This thing happened, but here's what
utilitarianism. Greater good.
So without getting too muddy and making myself seem like a horrible human being, there are things that happen that kind of result in a positive outcome that maybe are not the best way to go about it until 10 years later, and you look back and you think, okay, well, yeah, but you don't see both sides. It's impossible. We cannot go back in time and see it. But going back to what I said earlier, what you don't know doesn't hurt you, and that might be a really bad way to look at stuff. But in some situations, it can result in a more positive outcome.
No, that it is very interesting, and I'm not going to be partisan on one side. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, if the police here, do make a choice and they do something bad, like put their knee on a person's neck and kills them, I'm sure there's going to be a level of outrage, but nothing like in the US, because the US is over the last 20 years, it's been building, well, a lot more than 20 years. Obviously, the US has a lot of problems in their history, but I feel like a lot of those problems have been fixed. And then over time, it seems like one group of people have been pushing this narrative repeatedly over and over to where it just has people on the edge. And it's like one more thing. It's like the straw that broke the camel's back. It's like one more thing. And it doesn't matter that right when this happened, every person in the world, like all countries around the world, all the major corporations, the police department, everybody condemned this action. They charged this person with murder. Everything that should happen is happening. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
It's
What's even more interesting, I don't know, have you seen the George Floyd video where it showed, someone leaked it, I think it was the Daily Caller or something like that. They leaked it I think it was like 10 minutes before the incident actually happened, and he was already saying, oh, I can't breathe, oh, I can't do this. He was high on drugs and he was freaking out. And basically when he kept saying, I can't breathe, when he kept repeating that before even the cop kneeling on the back of him was saying that, I think they just kind of thought it was bullshit, or they were just like, oh, okay, it's like another excuse or something like that. And a lot of people speculate that he might get off of the murder charge because of what happened before. And of course, he was high on drugs and he had all these issues. So when he was saying before that he couldn't breathe, I think a lot of people were, all the cops were just kind of thinking, he's bullshit. But I think the real issue is that he was just more in medical trouble, and they kind of thought it was just an excuse. And then all that stuff happened, and they made a major mistake. I'm not saying what I forgot the officer did, but what the officer did was right, and everybody was just kind of pulling the bystander effect. The cops were pulling the bystander effect by not saying anything or doing anything, like, get off his back, let's have him treated or something like that. I think the whole situation was fucked. The whole situation, just when it came to George Floyd, the cops, everything was just, it was a bad mix. I was talking to my dad previously as well, and he kind of made up a point saying, if it wasn't George Floyd, it would have been someone else. He strongly predicts that just because with the election cycle and just with everything else that is going on in our current climate, that if it wasn't George Floyd, it would have been someone else that was the martyr. It's an interesting point. I'm not saying he's right, but it is definitely interesting to talk about. And what I feel like is sad in this country is that, I feel like I'm going to be saying these things and I'm going to get a lot of hate for it. But I believe that we should just talk about kind of everything. And it seems like everybody's just enclosed in just kind of one monolith mindset, left and right, and, whatever else. I know there's a lot of people in the center that are going to be listening to me, and they're like, that is very interesting, and that is kind of a different way of looking at it and stuff. But the loudest voices, they speak the loudest, they are heard the most, and I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for it, but we just jumped to conclusions so quick, and it kind of goes back to this whole marketing of journalism. They want to get the story as fast as they can, and they want to make the most money. And I guarantee you that every news outlet has made millions of dollars off these articles that they posted about George Floyd and everything else. And it's kind of sad, because if we waited just for a month to kind of see everything and have everything play out and have a little bit more transparency on how everything has happened, I don't think we would be writing. I don't think we would be doing all these things. And also, I believe COVID kind of had a mix too, since we've been stuck inside so much. So I feel like people are just frustrated and angry in general, especially African Americans. And I don't know, it's a weird time. It's a weird time. And I know if this happened in Russia, China, some of these, I feel like some parts of Western Europe wouldn't be as bad, but even like Spain and stuff like that, I feel like UK and the US would have more of the bigger freakouts and stuff. But I don't know. It just seems like there's kind of too much interest in it. There's too much interest for the divide. And maybe it's because of an election year.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think a big part of this fueled it and turned it into this giant thing is we've got an election coming up with extremely hated president. And it just,
Extremely loved and extremely hated.
Yeah. And, when you were talking earlier about the reaction of people, it's like it happens. And people just come to a conclusion, and I don't understand how it's possible, how you can call yourself an honest person by hearing about the news and you hear, okay? The first time I heard about it, I heard I heard or read, I can't remember, that a black man was killed by an officer when he had put pressure on his neck and had killed him or something.
Yeah.
My first reaction was, "Oh, that's a little bit weird." And I hear that he had his knee on his neck for 8 minutes while he's handcuffed. And then at that moment, I'm like, "Well, there's absolutely no reason for that." I've done, wrestling my entire life, 20 some years. I've done jiu-jitsu for a good portion of it. I know what it takes to subdue a person, and I know what it takes to subdue a person in handcuffs. And it absolutely there's no reason ever to put your weight on a person's neck once they're subdued and they're handcuffed. There's just no possibility for them to move if you know what you're doing. So at that point, I think, okay, well, this officer is obviously on a power trip, being a prick, taking advantage of his power. But at no point ever did I first assume that he must be a racist. He must be trying to murder this guy because he's black. And I don't understand how people can jump to the conclusion of this guy's a racist and wanted to murder a black man with zero evidence of racial motivation. Mm-hmm. And I've been waiting, and I don't go out and tell people they're wrong. I just ask them, hey, do you have any evidence that shows it was racial, or is this a prick on a power trip? So a lot of pricks from high school that are on a power trip. They want to bully people smaller than them, and then those people want to keep their power trip and they go into the police force. This is absolutely not to say at any means that this is what the majority of police are, but there are those people that get into it. I think we've all encountered pricks, that pull us over and we're super polite and they still treat us like crap. So it's kind of astonishing to me that it jumps to a race issue immediately, and the media supports that narrative over and over. And then the new video comes out, like you mentioned, and you see that before he's ever on the ground, he's, saying, I can't breathe. I'm going to die. I can't breathe. Well, police officers have 375 million interactions a year. How many times do you think people say, oh, you're hurting me. I'm going to die. I can't breathe. Every single day. If you ever watch that Cops episode, every single episode, you're going to hear at least one of those idiots on there talking about, I can't breathe, don't hurt me, your handcuffs too tight, this and that. They'll say anything that comes to their mind. Mm-hmm. So from a police officer's perspective, it's hard to blame them for not taking him serious when he's been saying that from the point he's sitting in his car with no one touching him. He's immediately saying that. Yeah. So this does not at any way justify that officer putting his knee on the guy and, whatever happened at all. But there is that sense that people just come to a conclusion immediately without hearing the evidence. And then a month later, they get the evidence and they don't care. And I've seen it repeatedly happen over the last couple of years. It's actually since Trump came into office. It seems like you pick a side and you stick to it. And if you don't stick to it, you're out. There's no middle ground. I can't support a few of Trump's policies and then say, oh, he's being an idiot when he says this and that. So
not a lot of middle ground.
Yeah, there's just no middle ground. It's astonishing to me that we're still in a two-party system. I cannot fathom that keeps happening. And so it's very, very frustrating for someone that's in the middle. And I lean for sure more libertarian, small government and whatnot. Um, but it's yeah, I'm just constantly surprised by it. And I don't understand how people can claim to be honest and sit there and say that there's systemic racism throughout the entire United States and the system needs to be ripped down without citing one specific example of a law or program or anything that supports racism.
It's kind of a marketing scheme. Yeah, I mean, you're just trying to get a hold of the biggest crowd you possibly can. I mean, I mean what I work in and what I see. So my eyes are kind of open to it. So I know what they are doing, and it's very interesting. And I feel like the right side kind of has its own battle. I know they're trying more, and I believe that they are doing some right things. But and there are some things on the left that I do agree about. I'm not in this monolith of, you know, whatever they say goes. I call bullshit on both sides, and I believe it's important too. But generally speaking, I lean more towards the libertarian right side when it comes to a variety of issues. And I think that is kind of the issue too, is because it's so easy to say left and right. But if I were on the right side saying I wanted, you know, strong borders, I wanted kind of more of a militaristic approach or kind of whatever, lower taxes. But at the same time, if I wanted like a universal healthcare thing or whatever, where do I lean on that? I mean, I guess you could just say you're kind of center and stuff like that, but people kind of demand to get, you know, your perspective on what side you are rather than just going into full detail. It's basically kind of like a clickbait version of what your politics are.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you want border control, you're a racist, and if you want uh, medical, you're a socialist. So you pick your poison. And what if you want both? Then you're a racist socialist. I don't know. It's a, for
That would
me,
basically be a Nazi, right? In the National Socialist Party, right?
yeah, right. I mean, similar words must fit.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
for me, it's very confusing because it seems that I get sucked into these arguments. I think probably because Trump is president, and I do see myself as being as honest as possible because I really don't have a dog in the fight,
Mhm.
and so most of the mainstream is very critical of him and says a lot of stuff that really isn't that true. And so when I try to be straight, it seems like I'm defending him, but I'm really not. I'm just saying, well, he did say this, but he didn't say that. And like I'm finding myself always defending Trump, even though there's a shit ton that I could get into that
You don't like.
Trump does bad that I think is stupid. And it's like, why do you keep doing these things? But everybody's so far left that everything he does, like the other day he pronounced Thailand silent. I don't know if you heard about that.
Yeah,
And
I
it
heard of
turned
it.
into a huge thing. And it's like, well, that's all cool. 1 second later, he corrected himself. Do we really want to go into this? And if you're
Hmm.
going to point out that, are you just going to ignore all the things that Biden missays? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest for just a moment. And so it seems like I'm some sort of hardcore Trump supporter, and I'm absolutely not. Obviously, well, not obviously, but I guess for
People who are
if I had
listening.
to pick between Biden and Trump, then yeah, technically, I would choose Trump over Biden, but it doesn't mean that I have a ton of problems with both sides.
Hmm.
Like I said, I would love more than a two-party system, but I come off as some sort of hardcore right wing just because I try to be honest and down the middle,
Hmm.
but that's not acceptable in society now. It's like, well,
Well,
Trump's
is
racist, so anything
society
he
or
says.
American society? Do you feel like it's reached to other parts of the world as well? I guess we'll just focus on your area. Has it kind of reached over there as well?
So I've gotten into a couple. unfortunate discussions while I'm here with people, and generally people tend to kind of spout out, like when you're out in a social group and they just assume, oh, Trump evil, so they just kind of badmouth,
Orange
everything
man
about him.
bad.
Orange man bad, yeah, and they make the jokes at his expense, and God forbid I ask them to elaborate on what they mean. Because I'm a very, like, I've become politically active in, my own sense of that. I
Yeah, you're
follow
just genuinely curious.
what's going on.
Yeah.
I listen to a extremely abnormal amount of podcasts. I don't know if maybe that's what everyone's doing now, but based on what they say, it doesn't seem like they're very informed. But I listen to as many perspectives as I can and try to come to my honest opinion. And it's amazing. The people that I have talked to, either they'll say a comment that is completely untrue, and I ask them where they heard that. They don't know. They can't remember. They heard it from someone somewhere, and they're repeating it. And I ask them to explain anything about it. They cannot explain it, but they know Trump said it. Like they were telling me, Trump supported the KKK and white supremacy. And I'm not arguing that he doesn't. Maybe he secretly does, but I asked for any evidence that says that he does. And they, the only thing that people will mention is, what is it, Ferguson, when he said there's good people on both. Was it Charlottesville? I can't remember now. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
And he made that comment. There's good people on both sides.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yes, I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I have to pull up the whole video and let them listen to what the whole thing says. And it's very clear that he's not talking about the white supremacists or the KKK, because he denounces them right before that. He talks about how bad they are and how horrible it is. But he's talking about in general. So there's two groups of people, and then the white supremacists showed up and joined a side, which happened to be a Republican side. Okay, there's also socialists that want to murder a lot of people, and people, I'm sure the congressional ball game where the guy, Bernie Sanders supporter, comes in and shoots people up. You don't suddenly say everyone on the left wants to murder people just because this guy is a supporter or just because this group is. So, it's very clear if you listen to the whole thing, but people just hear one snippet and they see the video that's 5 seconds long. There's good people on both sides. And now he's a white supremacist KKK supporter, and it's just not accurate. You can go on Google, or anyone that wants to do this, go on and type in, or on YouTube, Trump denounces white supremacy. And you're just going to get tons of videos where he denounces it. But, I'm talking to this person and say, well, why can't he just denounce the KKK or white supremacy? And I say, well, what do you mean? Well, he won't denounce it. He says they're good people. Well, where does it show me? And they cannot. And then you pull up tons of videos where he does do the thing. So,
as you were saying before, it's the flow of least resistance.
Yeah, and they want to jump on the train and follow what's going on, and they just assume that everybody in the group around them agrees that Trump's a horrible human being. And I think that he's bad in some ways, along with every other human being. I know I've done stuff. If someone recorded everything I said in my life when I'm with my friends, wow, I would be I'd be a horrible person.
Can you give me a few examples, Brent? I'd like to hear that. I think the guests would like to hear that as well.
You know what? I can't, but I appreciate you asking. Okay. But it's like people say things and they do stuff, and Trump maybe is stupid. Maybe he's saying these things when he shouldn't, and I absolutely disagree with a lot of stuff he says. But if we're going to just flat out lie and say he says stuff when you listen to 10 seconds of a 5-minute video, then why are you even talking about it? It just doesn't make sense. So, going back to your original question, like, do I think it's the same or different in different places? It depends who you talk to, but in my experience, the majority of people I talk to here have a very limited access to news. They hit what's popular. You go to any airport, you got CNN running 24/7. It's just, the mainstream media is what gets out. And so obviously, I told you I'm dating a Chinese girl now. It's very interesting to have conversations with her.
Mhm.
So they know what they have access to, and it's the same thing for me. I could be
Do those
completely wrong.
conversations come up that much, or do you just kind of stray away from it because you don't want to just get into it?
Actually, I steer into it because I really like this type of conversation, and I've been trying to have these sort of talks with someone that's a local that may support the Chinese government for a long time. And it seems like the teachers that I work with, even though I'm at a Chinese school, you have some of them that are pro-China, and a lot of them that I've actually talked to, they kind of play it off like they know that they can trust me. Like
Mhm.
I'm not going to go to the administration or something and say something bad, but so they will say stuff, but it's always in a joking way. Like, what'd you just say? Did the government hear you? Like sort of a
Yeah.
playful thing
Yeah.
like that. They know what's to an extent the limitations, but it's just normal for them. So it's not a big deal.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, no, I get it.
but sorry, I lost track of your question. I get into rambling.
No, no, yeah, we just kind of rambled off for a little bit.
Only a couple
One
hours.
No, one thing I do want to talk about is one major subject I want to talk about is where was it? The COVID. Now,
Mhm.
you pretty much were in one of the major hot spots. You were pretty damn close, just relatively speaking, than, the US, the UK,
Mhm.
whoever else. What was it like in the beginning? And how did things kind of evolve from there? Were you freaked out? How was it perceived over there?
Um, hmm. So when it first started, it was kind of a obviously I'm sure people can tell I'm kind of skeptical of everything I hear from the start.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to be deceived and go around spouting things that I then find out a week later were completely false. But at first, I started hearing a little bit about it. I think I had just started Chinese New Year. I was like a week into Chinese New Year, so that would have been February or something.
Yeah.
And then I find out after the fact, I guess this had been, first things started coming up, I believe, in November or something, but I hadn't really heard anything about it. Finished November, December of school. Or maybe it was January. I started Chinese New Year. Sorry, I can't really remember. It's either January or February I started Chinese New Year. I think February. But I'm about a week in and I start hearing stuff about a virus and there's more cases going on. And it didn't seem that serious to start. And then once I started hearing like there's the first case in Washington, because I think the first case in the U.S. was Washington, wasn't it?
Yes.
I think so. I'm not positive
Yeah.
about that. But
It was in like the Snohomish area. Yeah.
so then I'm like, a little surprised. I'm like, okay. And then I have some family, messaging me and wondering if I'm okay and this and that. But it's important to know China and Macau, Hong Kong. Those are three different places, even though they kind of get mixed into one. So for me, it wasn't really a big issue. I'm on Chinese New Year, just kind of hanging out at home. I go to the gym, go to breakfast, come home, work on my masters, do just basic stuff. I'm not out about that much. And you just hear about the cases rising and rising, and then all of a sudden stuff starts shutting down. So they closed down all the casinos shut down. Everybody's supposed to stay at home. They kind of had an at-home order that wasn't really enforced as far as law. Like I kind of went about my normal life. I didn't change anything, and for good or bad, I just did it. I just didn't think it was that serious. I'm listening to different things from different news sources, so I just keep waking up. I go to the gym in the morning, go to breakfast, come home, and then they closed all the bars, restaurants, casinos, gyms. So then everything shut down. And then luckily for me, like I knew some people, so without going into detail, I was able to go certain places that other people weren't allowed to go to just to keep my daily routine going. And then we heard about U.S. cases rising, And it seemed like it just kind of exploded into the US to where I was traveling between Macau and Hong Kong. So we have the two ways to get to Macau and Hong Kong. One is the ferry, takes about an hour, and the other one's the bus. And
The
the bus
Cotai
is
ferry.
yeah, and or there's the Cotai and Macau ferry, but both of those shut down. Sorry. And then the other way is the new bridge. So when you were here, they didn't have the bridge yet, but they finished the bridge, and it goes from the Macau side all the way to Hong Kong, right near the Hong Kong airport.
Oh wow!
And then you can get from there. I think it's the longest bridge in the world, but I might be stupid for saying that.
That's a long drive.
I think so. Yeah. So it takes about 45 minutes, but there's like it's only open to the transportation businesses, so like buses and escort services, not sexual escort services, in case you were getting curious. But so anyway, you go to the bus station. That's what I started doing. I started going to the bus station to go over because I had to see Mona. So for those that don't know, my girlfriend was living in Hong Kong. I was living here. So we need to get back and forth every weekend. And for the time being, the bridge was open, but the ferries all shut down. And my assumption is maybe the cost to travel versus the amount of people in the ferry versus the bus. I'm not really sure. But at first, we were just sitting in the bus as normal. It was packed full, so it didn't really make a lot of sense to me. But okay, you put the mask on and you just take the bridge. I get to Hong Kong, and then I have about a 30-minute bus ride from the airport to Causeway Bay, which is one of the main areas in Hong Kong. It's connected along the MTR that kind of goes along the whole city. And I did that for a while, for a few weeks. And then after a little while, can't remember how long, they shut that down. And we were kind of just stranded. So ever since then, so that's been 3-4 months now that's been closed. The border's been closed. But kind of the weird thing is when that stuff shut down, maybe 2 weeks later, everything opened back up in Macau. So like the bars have been open for a while. You know, I can go to the bar any Friday night with 100, 200 people. No one's wearing masks, no one's social distancing, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no problem. We do everything. And the gyms, everything opened back up within 2 weeks, I think. So for me, I've pretty much lived a completely normal life. Like everything's been open. Hasn't been any problems. Hong Kong started getting a rise in their cases recently. So Hong Kong shut down again. I think 2 weeks ago they shut everything down. But in Macau, which is an hour, 40 minutes away, depending on how you get there, but everything's completely open. They also opened the border so if you're a Chinese resident or from mainland, you can come in without any restrictions. Or if you are a Macau ID holder, you can go to mainland China and come back. But I'm a blue card holder, so I cannot go anywhere. So it's kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that the Chinese government, I think, kind of has a big influence, I guess you could say, in what Macau does, because it's a huge gambling capital, and the revenue that was lost over these few months is just astonishing. So if they open the border to mainland, now you can have Chinese tourists who return to Macau. But from what's recorded, there's no raising cases in Macau yet. In Hong Kong, who's dissenting against China, is getting like a raise in cases like 100 a day or something like that. So, I mean, you can take from that what you want. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying who's showing up and who's not. But to me, I think Macau was reported like one case or something last week or the week before or something. I quit looking into it because it was so low. It's like 1 or 2 cases, and then it disappears. No one ever talks about it. But then you hear media in Hong Kong talking about outbreaks that are going out of control, so they've re-shut down everything. So
what's the
really
perception over there? How do people just think it's like just another type of illness or flu, and they're just kind of like whatever, or are people very paranoid about it?
They seem more worried about it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Like because we went back to school months ago. So I was back teaching full time, normal. I think I had, what was it? February, March, April. I think we went back May 12th. I think I went back.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been teaching ever since then. Kids come in, we all have to wear masks, no more group activities. So everyone has their own desk. So it's kind of funny that it's like all the desks are moved like a few feet apart. So it's like, oh, we're doing social distancing.
Do you have less students?
No, only a couple, because there were some that were stuck in China while the border was still closed.
I see.
And then we start teaching classes, and it's like, social distance. We have to follow all these rules. They give me a bunch of rules I have to follow. Have my mask, all this stuff, either mask or face shield, and then all these other little things where kids are not supposed to even talk or be partners or anything. The second the bell, like the announcement goes, or the song goes off, it's like class ends. I say, my goodbye stuff. I leave. You look in the room, all the kids running around crazy, talking everywhere. But nobody, there's nobody there to make sure any social distancing happened. Kids hanging, hugging, and obviously in this society here, like physical contact is a lot more prevalent than in the U.S. Like you're not gonna during break time, you're not gonna look in a U.S. classroom and see kids touching each other that often. Like maybe the boys roughhousing a bit, but here it's like boys like all have their arms around each other and they're like face 1 inch from each other. Like what are we doing? What are we following these rules for? Because nobody's in this classroom making sure that this stuff is following during the 10-minute breaks, but suddenly during class I have to change my whole lesson and tell everyone to do individual work with no partners because they can't be within 6 feet of each other. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. So there's a lot of that stuff going on that is very confused.
Yeah. That's hilarious. How about adults? Are they kind of doing their part? Are they distancing? Or are they kind of not giving a crap? Or how are the adults like?
It really kind of depends. Actually, the older generation, I think they are more paranoid. Obviously, they're more paranoid because as they should be. You look at the statistics, and the older generation that's a much more serious issue for them. But with other teachers similar to my age or younger, there's not a lot of concern from what it seems. It's like they're more likely to make a joke about it than to be concerned.
Yeah.
So it's like somebody comes up to my desk and I'm sitting there without a mask on because I'm not going to sit with a mask all day. I'm just at my desk alone, and a teacher will come up and start talking to me, and then they make a comment about my mask, and then they laugh about it. And so that can either be that their nice way of telling me, hey, I should wear my mask all day, or they're kind of making a joke about it. Yeah. And from my opinion, based on the interactions, it kind of more comes across as a joke, because there's numerous times I go to their desk and their masks are off, and it's like they'll talk to me without a mask and not even cross their mind. So I think they're just kind of joking around because they see the same inconsistencies going on with the rules. It's like, well, you have to do this just because the government says, yet it's like we're doing it to the extent that we can follow the rules, but we're not taking it super seriously is kind of how it comes across. But we were in the elevator, me and the girl that I'm seeing now, she's Chinese, and we're in the elevator. And if I'm in the elevator and I don't wear a mask, no one's going to say anything to me. But she's Chinese, so we're sitting there. I have my mask on. We're in the elevator, and she gets in, and we're standing there. And the Chinese lady's like, "Ma'am, ma'am," and we're not thinking that anyone's going to speak to us. She's, "Ma'am," the third time, and she looks over. She's like, "Mask? You should have a mask. It's an elevator." And she's like, "Oh, sorry," and put on the mask. So stuff like that still happens here. It's just much more rare, and it's obviously a much older generation that's concerned about it.
Gotcha.
So, but that's like one time out of, I don't even know how many times we got in the elevator without masks, and no one says anything. Maybe partly because they don't want to be confrontational or partly because they don't care. It's hard to say.
Yeah, it seems like they were pretty passive over there when I visited. They're just kind of minding their own business. And God, everybody walks so fast over there. Do you feel like the speed of your walking has increased like dramatically being over there?
I don't know. I feel like it could be because
I don't
I
know.
guess I
I
never
felt like
really
I was
paid
walking
attention
10
before.
miles faster like when I was over there because everybody just walks so fast.
It's hard to say. I guess, when I'm walking with Yoko, she'll always tell me to slow down. So maybe I've gotten in the habit of walking faster. But I know that I hate walking behind people, even if they're going at the same speed as me. So I'll speed up to be in front of them.
Yeah.
But then there's always someone in front of them. So it's like I'm constantly speeding up and passing. So anywhere I'm going, plus it's like 80 to 90 to 100% humidity here all the time. So if I walk a 5-minute
You just
walk,
want to
I'm
get
just
inside where there's
pouring,
AC or something, huh?
Yeah, and then I'm pouring sweat by the time I get anywhere. So I've just become used to just being drenched in sweat all the time. It's like changing my shirt 3-4 times a day.
Jeez. So how? I mean, I've been over there as well, but the nightlife, the partying, the food, and everything are a bunch of amazing things over in Macau and Hong Kong as well. What else can you tell the crowd that is a good reason for them to come and visit?
Well, you know what's funny? I, I told a friend, so I was here for a while and then I went back to the States for like a summer or something a couple of years ago. And one of my friends was coming over here during the time when I was gone, which was stupid. And he was kind of traveling the world and he was going to be in Hong Kong. And based on my experience, from what I knew over time, I'm like, yeah, go to Macau for a day, maybe a night, you'll have a good time. And I just like, yeah, if you have any questions, message me. And I messaged some people that I knew, and I was like, hey, I have a friend that's coming into this area. Uh, he doesn't know anything, so if I shoot you a message, you guys want to hang out with him, take him out or something? And I'm like, yeah, we'll do it. And then he comes, but he doesn't ever message me. And he goes to Hong Kong, then he comes to Macau, and I don't hear from him like a month later, maybe longer. I don't even remember. But I was talking to one of my other friends who had talked to him. And he's like, yeah, my friend, or I'm not going to say his name, but it's like, yeah, he said Macau was the worst experience he ever had in his life. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, he said there's nothing to do. I mean, there's nothing to do. It's like the gambling capital of Asia, of the world. What do you mean there's nothing to do? It's like he couldn't find anything to do. So I guess if you just randomly show up here and you don't do any research, you're not. It's
You're gonna
not
have
like
the worst
Hong.
time.
Yeah, maybe because Macau is really focused on gambling, and you would
Partying,
think
gambling.
Well, you would think gambling, partying accompanies gambling. You would think that, but it only accompanies it to a certain extent, because high roller gamblers, they're not going to the clubs. They're going to spend money in the casinos, which is why you have these huge casinos here, and they're going to spend some money on escorts and prostitutes. They're not going into the clubs to pay $50 for a drink and look for someone. If you go into the casino floor, you're going to walk around there. You're going to see a tremendous amount of girls that are standing next to guys gambling.
Yes.
And when you look at the guy and you look at the girl, it's going to be very obvious that they're not together. They're together, but they're not together,
Yeah.
like they're escorts.
And one funny thing I do want to mention, I don't know if you will mention, but a lot of the women that do come up there are generally from like Southeast Asia, or they're from a country where the dollar is not necessarily strong in their country. They will go up to Macau, Hong Kong, where their dollar is much stronger, and they will basically do their thing for a couple of months, and then for the rest of the year, they come back super rich.
Yeah. So I've got some friends that, when I met them, I didn't know that they're escorts, or I don't even know if they call themselves escorts, but
They
by
call themselves
definition, that's what they are.
freelancers.
Is it? Okay. So
Yeah.
maybe you know more than me.
No, no.
You sandbagging mother. You know what? Why don't you just finish this by yourself?
No. You live there. Oh my God.
But no, I've met some, and you're hanging out with them for maybe 4 hours in the night. You don't even know. You're just hanging out, buying drinks, socializing. And then maybe 2 o'clock or so rolls around, and suddenly they're like, "Oh, by the way, I'm such and such per hour, but let's go to your place." Or else they'll say like, "Hey, want to go hang out at another bar or this or that, or let's go to your place."
Yes,
And then
I've seen
and
that
it's like,
personally, and it's the best trick ever because you're just getting drinks, you're having a great time, and it's like 2 o'clock rolls around, and then you're like, oh, it's over. Like, oh, I'm gonna take this girl home, and then they're like, well, I'm actually an escort, so if you want to take me home, this is how much it's going to cost. So they reel you in like that. It's a gamble for them, but when I was over there and when I saw it, yeah, it definitely works.
does because they reel you in to where you have like a minute. Obviously, you don't have an emotional connection with somebody you just met, but you have this like drunken emotional connection with them, to where it's like they were like a 5 when you met them, and then they're a 9 at the end of the night. And so, like, you're wanting to hang out with them, and so either if they're subtle, they'll be like, "Oh, let's go to another bar, or let's go to this D2, D3, something like that." I guess
Oh
for people
God,
that don't know,
D2.
those are a set of different clubs. So there's Cubic in Taipa, Pasha, which is now shut down, Bellini, which is now shut down, and then in Macau side, which is kind of the less extravagant side, is the D2, D3 clubs that people go to, and then there's a bunch of small bars mixed in between. And
What my experience from D2 is basically the bartenders will drink with you. Like it's free game. Like
yeah,
you can do almost what you want, and that's what blows my mind. I was talking about this in a previous podcast with a guy who um, has spent much time over in Vietnam, and none of
Vietnam
that
is
shit's
awesome.
allowed here.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
a lot of the bars. I mean, if they're going to follow the strict rules, you go to the bar. You just like, "Hey, can I borrow the bartender a shot?" And it's like, "Well, I can't take a shot with you. I'm working." But if you ask to buy a shot for a bartender or one of the working girls at one of the clubs here, if they don't do it, it's like they're being penalized. Like, why are you telling this customer no? That's driving them away. So they're like highly encouraged to flirt and drink with the customers, which, as most people know, like the more drinks that you have, the more outgoing, I guess you can say, like you
Hmm.
become. And then suddenly these workers are basically not working anymore. They're just getting hammered with the customer
Yeah.
while they're getting paid. And what they end up doing at the end of the night depends on the words of the customer. like how
Yeah.
smooth is that customer, and how
And
many shots of tequila did they give them.
yeah, and
So
I'll bring up a story, and it's nothing like too big. It won't get us in trouble or anything like that. But I remember you and I went to a bar, and it was D2, and
nothing.
we what? No, no, no. So we,
Nothing.
so so we went to D2,
Rated
and
PG.
yeah, I know, right? And so we go to this bar, and you basically told me, you're just like, oh yeah, you could buy the bartender some drinks and stuff. I'm like, oh, okay. So, we take a shot together, me and the bartender and stuff. Of course, she's just being flirty, and we're having a great time. It's 8 o'clock, and I believe bars close at like what, 6 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
Are you talking about 8 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock at night? Like,
No, no, 4 o'clock in the morning when they close.
oh yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it depends. If the people are
Okay.
still there, they just leave them open. But yeah, if you go to, I've left D2 at 10 a.m. before.
Okay.
So.
Okay, that's a different story, a different conversation for later. But
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah, yeah.
we're there, and it's definitely it's going well past 2. And the bartenders are just like, oh, why don't you buy the carousel? And if anybody who doesn't know what a
Oh yeah.
carousel is, the carousel is like there's 2 shots on each side, and it goes around this whole carousel. So I feel like there was maybe 10 to 14 shots. in this little carousel thing, and we're just sharing shots and we're just going crazy. They're expensive, by the way. I don't know if they just ripped me off because I was American and I didn't know, but it was $75 maybe or something like that. I can't. I don't remember the price exactly, but the bartenders are pretty much just taking advantage of me and taking all the shots and everything. And I remember Brent and I were there and we ordered so many carousels that both the bartenders pretty much just disappeared because they were probably way too drunk. And we were just so fucked up. And that night was just so crazy because I don't know, they just saw two American guys just blowing money at this bar, and there was nothing but prostitutes basically just like coming up to. I feel like it was more me. I'm not sure what you were doing at the time, but they just kept coming up to me and they're just like, "Oh, you could have me for $100 a night." I'm like, "No, get away! I don't want a prostitute." And yeah, I was like, "Just get away!" And it's funny, prostitutes. You think they would generally be younger and stuff. I had these like 50-year-old prostitutes like coming up to me like, "What the fuck? No, get the fuck away from me!" And yeah, it blew my mind just how crazy those bars can get, and those clubs / bars
Yeah,
can get, because it is definitely not allowed in America. Definitely not. They would get
yeah,
shut down and
absolutely not.
fined out of existence.
Yeah, and it really depends. Like by the time you came, I was pretty used to like the setting, so you know, I know how to respond to people when they come, and I know which ones generally are and are not. You. It might seem obvious, but when I first came, I remember getting tricked a lot. Like I was talking to girls for hours, thinking, "Oh, I'm so sly. I've got game. All these girls want to talk to me," and I
Yeah.
find out they're prostitutes. So like over time, I learned like there's just some sort of like subtle look about it. It's very occasionally I can still get tricked, but
Yeah.
for the
No, I
most part, not.
remember I went up to him. I was like, "Look, if you're a prostitute, I'm not interested." At the end of my trip, I was just blunt. I was like, "If you're a prostitute, I don't want to talk to you." And they would just walk away. Like, yeah, half of them would just like walk away.
Well, yeah, and I've made friends with some of them because uh, they're not like real prostitutes. That's not really how they get their living, but on their vacation, they want to make up the money for their vacation. So they
That's
come from other
interesting.
places. And so they kind of look just like a normal girl, but they're, cute.
So they
They
just
have
want
this
to
or that
find a
about
good
them.
guy that they actually want to hook up with, get some money
Yeah.
out of it, and they call it good. Interesting.
Yeah.
I
It's
didn't know
like they're
that.
living their normal, they're going about their normal night, but they want to, feed in a little bit. It's like if I can get a little bit of cash out of this, then whatever, I was going to do it anyway for free. So it doesn't matter. So
Okay.
I've made
So they
friends
really
with
did want me, but they just want some money.
well, probably not the ones that wanted you. Those are just ones that wanted
Yeah.
money. But the ones that wanted me, they really wanted it, and they were going to do it with or without the money. So a bit different. I mean, you're really ugly, so
Yeah, that's very true.
yeah. But yeah, so you just kind of get used to it and who is and who isn't. And I, at this point now, it's pretty rare that I won't be able to spot someone pretty quickly.
Hmm.
And I'm sure anyone listening would be like, well, obviously, da, da, da. But it's a bit different. You walk into like a night market, it's super obvious. But you walk into a casual bar and you have, 20 girls in there
Just all hanging out
and they,
together.
they all look the same. And there's just like a minute differences about something to where, I'm like, okay, I'm 80% sure that's a working girl, but I'm not sure. And I've been wrong a few times. It's different because these girls are on just vacation enjoying Macau, and some of them go about their normal life and want to make a little extra money. So it's not
Yeah.
like they're going out screwing a bunch of guys. But as you know, if you go to a bar in the US, you very likely take a girl home, but maybe 5 minutes before you screw her, she suddenly says, "Hey, by the way, I cost this much." It's like you either do it or you don't.
Yeah.
So it's
I
just
feel like
like kind
that's
of,
risky though, because they waste the whole night like prepping it up. I
yeah,
feel
for
like they
sure,
should be
for
a little
sure
bit
it
more
is.
upfront. Yeah.
And I've talked to some of the ones that I'm friends with, and they're like, yeah, it is risky, but it doesn't really matter that much because I don't lose
They're not
anything.
relying on the money.
Yeah, it's not. I'm here having fun doing what I normally do, and I'm going to either get the money or I'm not, and I'm just going to do what I do.
Gotcha.
And it's not any different than a Western girl that comes over and screws 12 guys while she's here, and she's just having fun. And this girl that gets money for it is suddenly a slutty skank or something. It's like, well, she's just being an entrepreneur while that girl's giving away her service for free. So it's whatever.
So the Westerners are more volunteers, while the East is more capitalist.
It seems that way. Their communistic behavior is very capitalistic.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
And also the Ozone too is a great place. It's one of the tallest bars in the world. I think Dubai might have beaten it now, but at the time it was one of the tallest bars in the world.
In Hong Kong?
Yeah, Ozone.
Did we go there?
I went there. I don't think we went together.
Oh, you went with that person you met that
Yeah.
may or may not be on record. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I just misspoke.
Might have. No, just went with a friend. We went to Ozone. Then I think we met in Lo Kwai Fong. LKF.
Yeah.
Lo Kwai Fong or whatever. Yeah, LKF. Yeah, LKF is also a very crazy place to go in Hong Kong. If anybody wants to check it out.
That's plus really fun. Actually, when I came as an intern in 2015, I didn't know that place existed. And so I was just, like trying to find something fun to do in Hong Kong. So I went over for a weekend, got a hotel. Don't purchase the cheapest hotels in Hong Kong. When you find it, don't do it because the pictures look good. You're going to show up there and it's not what the picture shows.
They have the most amazing photographers in Asia.
Yeah. It's like I was in this hotel and I opened the door and it's like a 5x5 room with a bed that is like a less than a twin bed. And I'm just like, the bathroom is just like an open little hole. And all the photos look completely different. They took photos at some weird angle that made it look like a normal room. And I'm like, oh, this is only like $20 a night. I can't believe this deal. So I went and got this hotel and I show up there and there's like bugs and stuff.
God.
Just pay. If you just pay $60 USD for a hotel, you're going to get a fine place, but don't try to be like, oh, I got a $20 hotel. It's $20 for a reason. There's not some super sale deal going on.
Yeah, we got a nice hotel when we went to Hong Kong, and I think that probably it was like 5-star, and we paid probably $60 each.
Yeah, I mean, if you just pay a normal U.S. price for like a Best Western style hotel, like $60 to $100, you're gonna get a perfectly fine place.
Yeah, really good place.
So if you look for a super deal, you're gonna get screwed. I mean, it's a super deal for a reason. Yeah. And so anyway, we went over there and had a good time. I don't remember what I was talking about, but it was probably something really cool. Oh yeah, LKF. Yeah. So the first time I went over there, I didn't know they existed, so I was on the wrong island. I was across the bridge more north, and I'm over there just looking for stuff, just walking until I found bars. Because for some reason I must have been phone illiterate. I didn't know how to Google where to go. I don't know what I was thinking at the time, but anyway, I went to a few places and met some people. It was fine, but if I had known LKF existed, it would have been a completely different thing. I think I was like back at Macau for 6 months or a year before I ever found out about LKF, and I went there. I'm just astonished. It's like a huge horseshoe shape of bars and clubs on both sides.
It's kind of overwhelming.
The road is packed. Yeah, it is. It's completely packed.
Because they have the loud club music and they're open bars, and they're just blasting. So you're literally getting 12 different basses, just hitting you, and your heart's like, oh, and you're buying a drink, and if you're agoraphobic like me, there's a bunch of people around. You're like, oh fuck. And then for some reason, the funniest thing that I noticed was all the kind of bouncers. There's a bunch of greeters there, and I believe they're bouncers there. They're all black or like Jamaican, and they're like, oh, come in, and they just grab you and they pull you into the bar.
Yeah, they're definitely strong encouragers.
Yes, they are extremely strong. They basically said, no. They grab you and they bring you in and they sit you down and they grab the waitress, and they're just like, hey, get this guy a drink right now. Like, I remember, the first place we went, and they were pulling me in, and then you like pushed him away. You're like, no, he's with me. And then you just grabbed me, and then we just walked away.
Yeah, this is my dick. Yeah, they're very invasive. It's like I think there must be some sort of pay structure for everyone they get in. They must get something because they sit you or they
Oh, they're very
pull you in,
motivated
and
to
then
do it.
like they make sure that the people notice they brought them in. It's like maybe they get
Yeah.
some
Yeah, they're
check
like,
mark or
hey,
something.
get over here, serve them now, blah blah blah, and all that stuff.
It's like some
And
of them are very nice, but they're also super aggressive sometimes.
yeah, and I also noticed too, like when we went shopping at like an electronic store or like a clothes store and stuff, one of the most uncomfortable feelings I had, because we don't experience this in America really in most stores, but they will follow you
Yeah,
around. If you go
everywhere.
to a Foot Locker, they will literally be 3 steps behind you looking at you, and it's like the most uncomfortable thing. But it's kind of nice because they're serving you, they're going to answer any questions that you have, but at the same time you're like, back the fuck off. Like, I just want to get a backpack, or I just want to get a pair of shoes or something like that. And that was kind of a shock, I guess, that I experienced when I was over there.
Yeah, I was when you started saying that, I knew exactly where you're going with that. It's like the first couple of years I was here, it's like I wouldn't even walk into a store unless I knew exactly what I wanted to buy. Because it's like so obnoxious and makes me paranoid. And I feel bad. It's like I go into this little store where no one's at, and it's like I want those shoes, but I'm not really sure. I want to look at them first and feel them. But I go in there, and it's like three people around me, like looking at me. Oh, what about this one? They're bringing me other shoes and
Yeah.
this and that. I don't need to be 5 inches taller. That heel's a bit long for me. I'm not a
Yeah.
tranny. Like I'm good on the shoe I was looking at. And then when you don't want it, I feel like I'm insulting them or something. So
Yeah.
it took me a little while to get over that, but now I kind of take advantage of it. So like I walk into a store and there's someone a foot away from me, I'll just be like, oh, I'll just ask a ridiculous amount of questions. And it's funny because half the time they don't know, and then they walk away to find out the answer, and you look by yourself for a while. So like I've gotten more used to it, but yeah, even in like the nice everywhere, like if you go to a street market, you're more likely to be left alone than if you go into those high
Yes.
end casinos. Because you would think in the street markets it's uncomfortable because they want to barter and this and that, but
Yeah. At the
on the
Portuguese
other hand,
market, I
they're
always
like,
felt like I was left alone.
yeah, they're just tired of the BS. They just if you want something, you'll mention it. Some of the stands they'll come up to you and be like, oh, like do you have any question, this or that?
Hmm.
But you walk into a nice place in the casino, they're just breathing on your neck literally the entire time. A couple of weeks ago, I was looking for some gifts for Yoko in some of the stores in the casino. It's like I could not get 1 second alone. They're just breathing on me.
Yeah.
Although luckily now they have a mask because all the stores are mandated to wear masks, so that's a positive thing.
So
But
I want to wrap up, and I always like to ask these 2 questions, and disclose what you would like to disclose. What do you think was, one, the scariest moment you've had over there, and two, what do you think is the craziest slash funniest story that you have over there?
I feel like I don't want to answer any of these questions.
You don't have to if you don't want to.
Let me try to think. What is the 10th craziest story?
Yeah, let's notch it down a little bit.
Uh, okay, wait. Tell me the first question again. Sorry.
Basically the scariest, like you almost got killed, you almost got mugged or something like that, those type of like scary scenarios you've been through. And another question, it would be, what's the craziest, kind of funniest, coolest story that you have experienced while you've been over there? Obviously I'm not trying to get you in trouble.
Well, you are. You
Yeah.
are. I, I, I've got a friend.
You got a friend.
Uh, Let me think of the scariest one first. Actually, this isn't scary at all, but we'll throw a softball here, a soft curveball, soft
Okay.
knuckleball.
Yeah.
You were here actually. We were talking. We were at D2. There's the worker with the braces. I don't know if you remember.
Yes,
This
I know
was a while
exactly who
ago.
you're talking about.
Yeah, pretty good looking girl. And then there's the Russian girl,
Oh,
the
yes.
blonde girl.
Yes. Yes.
It's like this is like a minute version. It's like you're hanging out, having fun, and you're just like dancing, buying shots and this and that, and you don't know anything about her affiliation or the huge jack dude that's 10 feet away the whole time watching to make sure you don't ever touch her. And then, we leave and we're just walking together, and all of a sudden this dude shows up, and in part of your mind, you're thinking, well, what's this dude up to? He's trying to, we're having a good time. And this jack dude thinks he's going to come in and, mess things up. And he, all of a sudden you realize that he's with her and he's her bodyguard. She's actually an escort. And then he just jumps in between. He's like,
okay,
this is over.
So let me explain the story now.
I'm being so vague because
No, okay.
You go for it.
So let me explain the story because the story involves me. So basically, I'm talking about D2 the night we're, basically getting a bunch of carousel shots, and we're just kind of going crazy. I believe she was Russian. She was definitely like an Eastern European girl. And I'm having fun. I'm dancing around. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, oh, this girl's like into me. She's super cool and she's super nice and stuff. And we're just having a fun time. And then right at the end of the night, this big Igor dude just comes up and he's like, okay, you're done. And he just grabs her, and then they just go into the back room of the facility and they just fucking disappear. And Brent and I are just looking at each other like, what the fuck just happened? It was the weirdest thing we've ever experienced.
Yeah, but then we kind of wait around, and she came back out the front. Remember, we're like, oh hey, we still think we're friends. We thought we were all friends. We're like, hey, we go over to her
too.
I still have a video of us. It's so stupid. It's
I know. I have a video of it too, and I don't.
My eyes are going in. Somehow they're going in like 3 different directions. It's like, I'm sure they thought we were, anyway, something not ideal. But then we just like, I thought we were going to our friend, and we got intercepted by that guy again. We're like, oh, this is not
it would have been very bad because the guy was 4 times our size. Like it's definitely a guy you would see in like Hollywood. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Do you have any other stories you'd like to share?
I mean, stuff like that is pretty normal.
It's pretty common, yeah. Just those very awkward, interesting things that an American generally wouldn't see.
I mean, I have some friends that have some good stories, but what was it? Actually, I can tell this one. There's, I was at Cubic. It was a long time ago, but I think I sent you the photos, actually. This group of girls that I met, they're extremely attractive. I don't know if you remember. You already know what I'm about to say, but they're very attractive girls. And, we're hanging out. I don't remember how I met them. Maybe I met them at the club. I don't remember, but I'm there by myself. And we're just hanging out, buying drinks, and something we didn't really talk about. When I first came here in like 2015, it was definitely a shock for me because, I'm a white guy. I have blue eyes, which blue eyes here is kind of like a thing, I guess. Even my students now, was after class, have come up to me like, Mr. Brent, why your eyes are blue? Blue eyes. I always, even after 4 years of being here, I still have students talking about it, saying stuff to me. So it's kind of an abnormal thing, I guess, and depending on what part you go to, it's more or less common. So there's certain places in Macau I can go where I show up there and random strangers will want to take photos with me, and
yes, that happened to me
not
as well.
famous or anything. Yeah, it's like you're walking and they're like, oh, photo, and you think they want you to take a photo of them, but actually they want you to be in their photo because maybe they're from like somewhere in mainland China. They're not used to with a white person or something like that. I don't know. So it's a bit unusual, but when you go to the club, this, when I first came, happened a lot more. And I don't know if there's a difference between then and now, but I felt like when I used to go back when I first came, I felt like I'd walk around the club and I'd be the only white guy in there. But now when I walk around, I feel like I see a bunch of foreigners. And I don't know if that's a difference or maybe I was just blinded to it when I was first came because I was overwhelmed with the lack of diversity. And so it just kind of grew on me over time. Now I realize, oh, I'm not really the only white guy here. I was just self-absorbed. So
Mm-hmm.
it might be a bit different, but yeah, so I'm going around and people just kind of invite me to their table as I walk by, and guys and girls. It's not like a sexual thing. It's like, oh, this guy's by himself, and they invite me, and we start hanging out. So I get invited on this particular time by a group of girls, and they're all very attractive. Like I was surprised that this group of girls would invite me to their table. We're hanging out for quite a long time, having fun, drinking, this and that. And I don't remember exactly how this happened, but one of them, the night is winding down, and one of them asked me a question along the lines of like, have I ever experimented or something like that? And I'm like, at this point, I get a little bit of a red flag. I'm like, what are we doing here? What kind of experience? I did have chemistry class, but
Yeah.
I don't know where they're going with this. And so we start talking, and I come to find out, long story short, these are all guys. Actually, I can't say they're all guys, but at least two of them were guys.
Yeah.
And they were absolutely gorgeous. I was like shocked. Like I couldn't believe I'm like doing like triple looks, and I didn't really care. It didn't matter to me. But then they're asking me like, hey, do you want to go home? And I'm like, well, no, but you tricked me. Yeah, you really fooled me. I thought you were complete girls. I couldn't see a single thing about them that I would assume was a girl. And then I sent the photos to some friends, and I was like, hey, like what do you think of these girls? And everyone's like, oh, super good looking. I was like, yeah, they're all guys.
Yeah,
And
you said it to me too, and I said the same thing.
yeah, it's like so you run into these situations where stuff like that happens, and you just have no idea. I think over time I've grown more aware. I think that was so long ago that I didn't realize what could happen with a little bit of surgery. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I talked to these girls for a while, and I kind of became friends with them, and they were telling me about their surgery processes and whatnot, and how everything works the same, which I still don't know how that's possible, because I didn't actually test anything out to find out. But I was friends with them and hung out with them a few times and whatnot. But yeah, they were telling me everything works the same as a girl, and they seem completely like a girl. So actually, one of them told me she had been married for 3 years, and before her wedding, she told her husband that she was a guy, and then they got a divorce because he wouldn't marry her anymore. But to me, it's just astonishing that you could be together for that long and not know.
They got married, and then 3 years after she told.
No. I'm sorry, not her husband, her fiance.
Oh, they
So
were dating for
they
3
were
years.
dating for 3 years. They were engaged to get married, and then before the wedding, she felt guilty, and she told him, and I guess that caused them to separate. But she told me he never had any idea, never suspected anything, and I don't really know how that's possible, because I don't know if really what's fully possible with surgery and whatnot. But when she told me that story, I was pretty surprised, because
Yeah,
it's a
I
long
feel
time
like
to
you
be
would
with
know the
someone and have
difference,
no
but
idea. You
yeah, I
would
feel
think
like you would
so.
know the difference, but maybe
I
not.
mean,
I don't know.
she told me it all worked the same, which still doesn't seem possible to me, because there's like fluids and stuff that seem like they wouldn't be able to work the same way. I
Yeah,
don't know,
I don't
but
know. Yeah.
it's hard to say.
Well,
So yeah, stuff
we've
like that.
we've hit about 2.5 hours.
Dang,
I
girl.
know. I'm so glad we finally had this talk. I know we've been talking about it for a month now, so I know
Yeah,
things are
sorry
gonna
to
probably
keep
slow down.
delaying. I've just got
No,
crazy
it's
stuff
cool.
with my work and masters and all this crap, all the stuff going on. I'm just so busy all the time.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah, I know we were talking before. You don't want to plug in anything?
no, I'm good. I mean, Brent Evans, if you can find it, that's great
Yeah,
for you.
I'll link your
I don't have
Instagram.
anything anyone wants to see. Maybe me flexing or something in a photo, looking hot and sexy. Nothing anyone really needs to learn about. I don't have any political statements online. I pretty much keep to myself, and just spout my mouth off when I get the chance. So
I've been wanting to come over there, God, for so long. I even possibly moving over there just because everything that you say and just with everything that I've experienced was amazing. The only thing that sucked when I went was I kind of felt sick throughout the whole time, being especially on the ferries and stuff. I don't do really well with the ferries, so it really kind of messed me up. But overall, like, it was a great time. I had so much fun, and
What's that?
it's
What's that? The travel shoot. I'm having a brain fart right now, but
like the jet lag.
yeah, jet lag. Sorry, yeah,
Well,
jet lag. Is
it
that
was the
was
jet
part
lag,
of
but
it?
I also have a thing called it's like cruise syndrome or whatever, where I feel like I'm on um like a ferry, and I feel like I'm bouncing back and forth the whole time.
Even when you're not on a ferry,
Yeah,
or what?
yeah. I had this weird equilibrium thing that just really fucks with me. So,
Hmm.
but
That's
yeah,
unfortunate.
and so
Is that
that's why I
like
was
a
just kind of
vertigo?
uh, kind of, yeah. I just felt like I was rocking back and forth the whole time. I don't know the full all the full details of it, but I know it has to do something with your equilibrium, and you feel like you're just rocking back and forth, like even
Yeah,
days after. So like the whole time, me going back and forth from Hong Kong to Macau, I felt like I was rocking back and forth, which really sucked. But
yeah. It can definitely. I mean, I've got some student like we go for a book club and stuff, and I've got some students that refuse to even sign up for book club because they know when we go to competition, it's in Hong Kong, and they get so sick on the boat, and
yeah,
then
well,
they
now you
can't
have
get
the
rid of it. It
bridge, which
just
is
feels
pretty
like,
cool.
yeah, it's a lot cheaper. It just takes longer. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a
Well,
good situation. Next time, if we can ever get the fucking borders open, you and I can meet in Vietnam or Thailand or something. Both of those places are just so great to go to visit. So
oh
many
yeah,
good
I
things
love
there.
Thailand so much. It's amazing. But yeah, Southeast Asia is great. But yeah, it's getting late here, and I want to thank you for coming on. It's good to definitely catch up with you and talk about all the crazy shit and stuff over in the Hong Kong and Macau area and stuff. So thank you for taking your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And if you want a strictly political one, I tried to be super vague so that we didn't get too deep in the weeds. But if you want a political one with the statistics, since everyone probably thinks I'm full of BS because I didn't give any specific information, you just let me know. I got
Yeah.
numbers for you. I got numbers, got all kinds of numbers for you.
Yeah,
I just
definitely.
didn't want to bury us into too much of the stuff that people are probably tired of hearing about anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to cover, but yeah, man. Hey,
Yeah,
thanks for coming on.
no problemo, Captain.
Cool. Well, just stay on. I'm just gonna end this recording right now.
All right, why don't you just end it then?